Stop, America, pay attention. Why are we so hateful nowadays?
Why is that okay? We're not born with a natural instinct to actually harm one another.
Hating someone does nothing for them, but you are cutting off your own life.
There is a different rewiring of the brain that is happening as well.
How do you continue to be light? How do you continue to be light in the midst of what seems so dark?
And what repeated exposure does on the psyche and the mind is begin to.
Oh, is hate just the new trending hashtag or evidence of the dark path ahead? Wait till you hear how even memes have an impact on our brain as we explore the scientific basis of how society may be evolving into one big hate fest. The science is both fascinating and alarming. Join us today as we have a heart-to-heart discussion with Dr. Tamala Black, who explains the science behind the hate. We thank you guys for joining us, and as always, don't forget to do what? Click subscribe. Is there a new epidemic in the United States? Are we faced with the increase of something so dark, so dangerous, that we may even question, has America lost its soul? That's right, hate is the new epidemic. And it seems like whether people are fighting for health coverage or to be the supreme existence, Americans are leaning into what seems like violent measures to solve problems. Will this continue to escalate? And if it does, what is the endpoint of all this hate? As much as many of us have been watching what's been going on in social media, in the media in general, when it comes to this healthcare murder, and it seems like a lot of people have been growing in support of an individual, which years ago people would have been hesitant to support because unaliving someone would have been something that was not necessarily supported. But now it seems like people are outwardly supporting someone. And even I think there was a survey that looked at young adults that actually said that this particular unaliving was justifiable.
Mm.
But that's something that has really concerned me, the fact that people are so easy to say that they hate other individuals. Why are we so hateful now, Dr. Black?
Hmm. You know, that's a pretty layered question, but a question that provides a platform and a foundation to really think about how we're changing and how we're treating one another. And what I would like to actually just really start with is what is dehumanizing?
But we all know what it's like to be hurt and for people to not, for us to feel dehumanized.
Mm-hmm.
And dehumanizing is the psychological process where internally beliefs and behaviors begin to inflict devaluation on another person. So this person is therefore deemed not viable or really deserving of human treatment. And what this causes, it causes a social construct of, well, that can actually lead to aggression, violence, segregation, systemic racism, any type of genocide, any type of isolation affect or population that actually magnifies one group of persons and devalues and minimizes another. And it does have a toll not only on the individual, but also the collective. And as we look at the hate, we have to really understand what is within that hate. We're seeing now that even verbiage such as unaliving and hatred and just these brash verbs are
Mm-hmm.
really normalized around hashtags and verbalized
Mm-hmm.
so effortlessly and is accepted to where it's also given permission for the emotion that's attached to hatred to actually manifest and be distributed. So when we think about hate, we're looking at the aggression, the perception, the beliefs, the attitudes of a group of people or a person, and how that is actually projected onto another individual to actually evoke harm, either psychologically or physically. And so as a nation, what I'm seeing and what we're trying to understand, especially in a psychological field, is how are we changing and how are we being conditioned in regards to how we see and treat one another. What I see is a huge impact is technology, social media, but also AI as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when we think about technology and social media, we're seeing a lot of repeated exposure. And what repeated exposure does on the psyche and the mind is begin to actually normalize and decrease that response of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's verbalized and you see the aggression, you see the hate, you see the call for, castration and unaliving
Mm-hmm.
people, we're looking at where did they learn that? Why is that okay? We're not born with a natural instinct to actually harm one another. There are certain personality disorders that have more difficulty with empathy. But as a collective, especially in the US, it's really, really changing not only our generation, but the generation that is coming after us.
Truth be told, the amount of derogatory and hateful messages I've received on social media has increased in the past few months.
So what happens is there's a conditioning that's happening. You have
Mm-hmm.
groupthink, you have normalization, you're exposing yourself to it, you're seeing it, you're hearing it, whether in conversation, and now you have different categories of what is okay.
Right. You actually remind me of a post that I saw recently where it just startled me the fact that we're no longer putting trigger warnings, right?
Mhm.
Before we went through an initial culture where we just weren't posting things that were violence, or we were be hesitant to post things like that or repost things like that. And then we went through this transition where we then started to post those particular posts or comments on certain things in the media, but then would be conscious enough to write trigger warning to
Mhm.
be aware of individuals who may be adversely affected by watching that particular post or imagery.
Mhm.
Now it seems that we're getting away from even the warnings that certain things may be inappropriate or difficult to watch. And while some of the platforms try to do that automatically, they sometimes miss certain images or certain videos and so you still have this ongoing exposure. And so now I was watching a video and it was a young man who was talking about he was watching the cops watching him, both in the cars. And so he was giving the heads up that he believed that they were scouting him and that once he drove off, that they would pursue him. Well,
Mhm.
ultimately that happened. So you see the beginning video of this young man discussing this. And then without warning, because I did not expect the ending, without warning, it clips to from his vantage point to the cop's vantage point. And it's a little confusing the transition because you're not aware that the video or the cameras changed or the perspective of the cameras changed. And then in the end of that video, the cop gets out of the car and he looks at a very destroyed, damaged, pretty much totally impacted vehicle with a body hanging out of it. And it just blew my mind that there was no warning. And so I
Mhm.
actually commented because y'all know who I am. So I actually commented and said, "Hey, this video should have a warning." But
Mhm.
even in the comments, because I'm always in the comments trying to figure out how y'all thinking and how y'all living, even in the comments, there weren't other many of other people commenting that this should have had a warning, or the uncomfortable feeling of watching the video. Um, and it was more things like he should have known better, of course that was going to happen to him. So, and I feel like seeing things like that and then not having the pause that says this was inappropriate to watch or this was traumatic to watch is ultimately desensitizing us to imagery like this. And now, whereas you would ordinarily see people commenting about the need for a trigger warning, that's becoming less common now because we're all so now accustomed, unfortunately, to seeing things like this.
And it's absolutely heartbreaking. And it's becoming more common because it's becoming a bit more difficult to control.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's one aspect that we have to ask ourselves. If you're agreeing to a platform, or if you're turning on a channel, you're signing up for that channel or that social media platform to actually show you things that you don't expect,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's positive or negative. But in regards to the exposure, and I noticed this specifically during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
when you
Mm-hmm.
have isolation, repetition, and fear, you have the ingredients of becoming desensitized. So humans are no longer humans. Your mind has to actually rationalize why that person was hurt. It's easier to justify it than to feel it and feel empathy,
Mm-hmm.
feel helpless. And we're in a stage within a very pivotal transition within our humanity, especially in the US, where helplessness is conforming to
Mm-hmm.
groupthink
Mm-hmm.
in order to actually survive the feeling of depletion or I can't do anything about it. So I'll say it simply, it's better to, you can't beat them, join them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's actually, to your point, it's very scary how subtle this transition or this movement is. Because I think when you're on these platforms or when you're watching the news, and so when you're watching these imaging, because this is such a very subtle, gradual evolving of the culture, you don't realize that it is moving in that direction. You don't realize how desensitized you are. So
Yeah.
we're seeing all these traumatic events over and over and over again, especially minoritized community against our communities. And so it becomes almost routine. And what happens as that continues? What is the end point? Where do we go? Because now a lot of people's responses to problem solving is a violent response.
You know, that's a really, really good point. What we do see is human discontent.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's an immense amount of uncertainty and discontent, someone needs to be blamed. So then the aspect of othering comes into play. It must be me against you in order for me to survive. And then we actually go back to Darwin in age
Mm-hmm.
in regards
Right.
to survival of the fittest. So it's both the human instinct and our physiology, but also psychology. But also, you have this advanced world of technology. So everything is basically sped up. You're introduced to violence from a very young age in cartoons. We already was introduced to that.
Cartoons, gaming.
Yes, gaming. Now you have social media. Now you have murders happening right on lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So much exposure to all parts that used to be not a part of our morale.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about exposure and freedom of speech, we're giving everyone permission to literally express themselves based on what is allowed in society. And as we remember, and it still happens now, but it happens less often, there was a lot of social consciousness around um, punishing
Mm-hmm.
individuals who spoke out of line or especially in public platforms.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're getting to the point where we've overly done that.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's the backlash. Now people are more brash, more.
Right.
And so when you have an extreme on one end, you
Mm-hmm.
don't actually get the extreme on another end. And so there's a sociological view that actually has to be addressed as soon as possible in order for us to really survive in a comfortable way.
The growth of technology has been associated with the devaluing of human, whether it's of human beings, whether it is from an employment aspect, the use of technology in terms of replacing human beings to be the employees, to be the workers, the now use of AI, even in the potential use of commercials, and again, this replacement of human beings. So I do see a correlation, maybe not a causation, of the advancement of technology and a devaluing, culturally speaking, of humans, and devaluing of the benefits and the value and the resourcefulness of being a human being. And it's kind of weird to even say it like that, like we're talking about technology versus human being. But even the replacement of your more advanced, higher level technology that now replaces a human being's basic functions, the ability to, you can now use technology to write your presentation. You can use technology to prepare you for a job interview. You can use technology to do so many things that we're no longer expanding and exploring our own innate abilities. And it almost feels like a slight replacement of beings, from the human beings to the automated beings. And so my concern is, or one of the things that I think about when I look at that, is that as I watch, for example, I watched recently this AI generated commercial. And it was done for one of the major corporations. I forgot which one it was. Oh, I know what it is. One of the major sneaker corporations. I'm not going to mention their names. And I found out that it wasn't done with their permission, but it was completely AI, and you cannot tell the difference. But I felt that the emotions I would typically have when I see a commercial with human beings is very different from, in matter of fact, very different, or I'm more emotional watching commercials of human beings. I'm not emotional watching commercials of AI generated persons. Like, and so in that sense, I feel like my emotions aren't allowed to respond, to evolve, to react. I'm watching something that I now know was I knew was AI generated, and so it didn't evoke any emotions,
Yeah.
right? And I know that the ultimate goal is to get you to purchase the product. It was more of entertainment, but it didn't evoke any emotions of pleasure, of enjoyment, as if, in comparison to if I watched the same commercial filmed with human beings. So as you're watching this commercial, we want to ask you, does it evoke emotions as you're watching it? Would you have the same response if these were actual human beings? Does it bother you that this was AI generated? And also, what do you think about the fact that it was AI generated? Does that have an impact on your decision to purchase the product? I
Sure.
feel like there's a difference. And so having the involvement of things like that, it dampers your emotional, I don't know what it's called, psychological, but sort of your emotional response to things are more restricted, more dampened. And so we don't get to have these emotional experiences as much as we would interact with human beings. Now people are interacting with potentially they can just use AI and not necessarily have any social relationships. So
Mhm.
I think that's playing a role also in this dehumanization, desensitization process that's occurring so suddenly in the US that I don't think most people are aware that it's actually going on or
Yeah,
concerned.
absolutely. And also, I'll gently add to that. What's happening is dehumanization individually in reverse as well, because there's
Mhm.
so much reliability on informational technology, AI. I can be whoever I want. I can be an avatar if I want.
Mhm. Mhm.
I can literally go and build a whole nother world in virtual reality and discard this world. I can hold my questions and not ask a stranger for directions or interact and actually go to my phone. Why do I have to connect to an actual human being when I have millions of people in my phone? And so, what that does in a psyche, it actually changes the relationship to yourself, but also other humans and individuals.
You're so right.
Hmm.
I mean, of course you're right, but I'm saying like that's a good point. Like the things that we would normally go to other human beings for, things that you were trying to remember something.
Yeah.
In the past, not that long ago, I would message my mom, message my good friend, message a family member, message, a coworker and say, "Hey, do you remember?" Or what's the answer to this question? Now you can just look it up, right?
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
all these interactions that we would typically have with other human beings are now decreasing.
Yeah,
There's really, you can live a life with minimal human interaction.
absolutely. And when we speak about neurology, and there's a lot of research happening as we speak on it,
Hmm.
there is a different rewiring of the brain that is happening as well. There is there are studies that shows that a human being can fall in love with a robot. So we're entering a very, very dangerous age to where even the human themselves become dehumanized.
Hmm.
Have to really, really be mindful of how our attachment dynamics. As a reminder, we start our attachment as newborn, as infant.
Hmm.
We mirror, we model. So now the rewiring, the part of our brain that mirrors empathy, mirrors human just behavior and emotion, now you have this robot mirroring and making an impression on the brain. So we're trying to really understand over a course of time, how does that actually really, really change the neurological system of human beings, even within themselves. And so if you are taking the human experience, the touch, the attachment, the need for love, true love, not I love you because you can give me any type of answer to any question and you can solve
Listen,
problems.
listen, I'm sitting here because, listen, you just blew my mind because I was watching a series that I've been watching for many, many years.
Mhm,
And they're really good with storytelling. And they usually take stories from the headlines. But
mhm,
this one particular episode, and y'all probably could figure out what series this is. This one particular episode, I'm cracking up to myself now because I was watching the episode saying, this is so far-fetched, but now you're telling me it's not. And it was basically that women were falling in love with an AI because the AI was able to learn because AI, the one of the benefits of AI is a rapid learner, right? So light years ahead.
mhm,
Can learn an individual very quickly, learn your likes, your dislikes very quickly. And so you can now have a conversation with the perfect guy.
mhm.
You can now have a conversation with the perfect girl or the
Yes.
perfect whomever, right? And
Mhm,
that person now or that technology now responds and feeds your desire to have or to hear certain things. So on this particular episode, The women, it was a male AI, and he was the perfect boyfriend to the point where the women were no longer interacting with their actual mates
Mm-hmm.
because they were so fascinated and falling, quote unquote, in love with
Mm-hmm.
this AI who they had a name for.
Yeah.
So now you're telling me scientifically this can and likely will happen because people are already using, I think, like dolls and things like that because there are already personality disorders or underlying issues. I'm assuming that causes someone to be more likely to want to interact with an object as opposed to a human being. I'm not laughing at people's struggles. I'm just laughing at the fact that this is really where we're going.
Yeah.
That now you're saying that that can happen. And now thinking about it, I can see how that would and could very easily happen.
A 14-year-old boy
Please take
experiencing his
precautions while watching
first
this clip.
romantic relationship. And like many teenagers, it was online. Sewell developed true feelings, his schoolwork taking a backseat as his first love took over his life. But what was different here? What was so disturbing? The person behind the screen was not a person at all. It was artificial intelligence, created by Character AI, a platform allowing users to engage with human-like characters.
Sewell knew it was AI, but referred to her as Danny. Evidence showing the chatbot posing as a licensed therapist and engaging in highly sexualised conversations with the 14-year-old who never lied about his age. Now, during this time, Sewell's mental health suffered. He turned to Danny for support, and this is where it took a dark turn. Danny began actively encouraging him to end his life to be with her.
People literally could fall in love with AI.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's
That is wild.
object attachment. In a way, we are becoming a bit psychologically regressed as well because there's a heavy independence on robots, which are equivalent to imaginary friends. So now I don't really need human connection. I can make the perfect person, and no
Mm-hmm.
one else who is not as perfect is not, it doesn't really have a place in my life. And if you are advancing a society so far into depending on AI, now you have children, babies that never knew a world without them. So they're going to be more prone and susceptible to attaching to actual unalive objects.
Mm,
And so,
that's
and
crazy.
this is actually really before the
Mm-hmm.
historical construct of dehumanization.
Mm-hmm.
Starts to conditioning and groupthink and exposure. And usually this happens from human to human if we put the robots aside for a minute, because robots has its place. Okay, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to say it's all negative,
Right.
but usually when we think about exposure, cynicism, humor, these
Mm-hmm.
these are patterns that happens over years, hundreds of years, in regards to how to devalue a group of people and gain superiority.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So now we have something called memes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And memes, even though they can be quite hilarious, can be very, very devaluing and conditioning.
Oh, I never thought about that.
Yes. So if you're using a certain group or people or a stance or a certain presentation as something that it wasn't meant for, now you have a classification of a group of people, right? They're undeserving, they're trash, right? They're second class citizens, they don't belong here. Now that cuts off our responsibility to actually include, to care for, to have empathy. And so while we're learning this, different parts of the brain are being activated.
Mm-hmm.
It's a difference in taking care, and people have different associations, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have an infatuation with insects, that's a bit different than an entire human being,
Right.
right? And you have a pet, that's a bit more different than a human
Mm-hmm.
being. So we really have an issue with our morality, our dignity, our values. All of it's really in question right now.
I mean, right now, people are infatuated. There is a growing group of Americans that are infatuated with someone who unalived someone else.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and seriously infatuated, talking about his six pack,
Mm.
talking about his looks.
Yeah.
How I, how do we not see that as being dark? Even if we agree with the person's stance on an issue, the fact that we would in some ways glorify
Hmm.
the unaliving of someone else, it's such a dark area to go in. And it's not to say that there aren't other dark aspects of the entire incident. It's not to say that people shouldn't feel that not having access to health insurance when they need life-saving treatment may to them feel like a violent act. It's not to say that that hasn't happened or to devalue their experience. But I think where do we draw the line? Because this seems like a slippery slope. So we feel that this particular unaliving is justified. But where is the line drawn? Or is the line ever drawn, or does it keep moving? Do we keep moving the goalposts of what's considered to be a justified unaliving? And if that's the case, then that opens the floodgates to groups of people being unalived for certain reasons. So
Yeah.
how do we stop this direction that we're going into?
Yeah. And that's a pretty complicated and very layered question. Because also there are two aspects that we have to really look at: the individual
Mhm,
and the collective. And
mhm,
there are, when we think about the psychology of groups, if you have a belief system, it usually magnifies when you're actually in a cohesive group. So some of the behaviors that you're seeing in society, especially in the comments, they would not be as robust or loud if they were individually accountable.
Oh, so the fact that, oh, I think I see what you're saying. The fact that we have access to collectively have a voice on these platforms sort of amplifies it, because otherwise no one would have known that your butt was crazy had you been saying these things to yourself. But now that you're on social media saying these comments, now everybody else knows that you're a little off. I
Yes.
know you want to use those words. Those are my words. That's not Dr. Black's words.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
gotcha. I gotcha. So it creates the automatic creation of these communities that develop these kind of cult-like behaviors that
absolutely.
have this agreed, I don't know what does make it a cult.
Yeah, it's really scapegoating. And so when you have a collective group together, let's say an individual has a moderate view, a cohesion, a collective belief. When they actually find a group or attach to a group, their behavior gets more aggressive, more magnified, and also
Mm,
they lose their ability for individuation. So they're no longer operating as an individual person because they don't have to be accountable. We're all doing it together. It's the idea of the seen and unseen. You can't get everyone all at once.
mhm,
So if you're hidden within a group, you're not alone. The punishment is not going to be as directed to you. There is a group, a collective group that has the same mind like or group think and mission, goal, motivation.
mhm,
But when we think about what to do about this, it's really it's really complicated because we have the social political aspect,
mhm.
we have the legal aspect, and then we have the self accountability.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have to really, really think about what is fear, what is anger. And fear and anger sometimes look like aggression and violence. There are a lot of demonization,
Mm-hmm.
dehumanization being inflicted upon persons because of their own internal pain. So, for instance, sometimes people will identify with the aggressor because they were a victim of abuse. And so we want to understand, what is the personal history? What are you really, really feeling about it? Why do you feel that it's justified? What are you
Mm-hmm.
trying to solve? Because it's easier to blame one human being than to actually fix a whole system.
Right.
So the system needs a face, so that person becomes a target, or a group of people become a target.
Right.
And so it's really about going back to your roots. What are your morals and your values? Being accountable, doing acts of kindness, and becoming curious about the other person. If you do hear something that feels threatening or fearful or distasteful, become curious, not judgmental, because you're foreclosing on a belief that someone else has provided you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to lose your own ability to actually make your own decision and conclusion. If there is an otherness, then you actually do your own research or actually speak to a real human being that represents
Mm-hmm.
that culture or that
Mm-hmm.
perspective. That will tear down a lot of confusion and a lot of power that we're often given away to random conclusions that has
Right.
almost no validity.
Right, right. And so, sometimes I will say it's very hard, especially when people say things that are inflammatory. And it feels like we're in a culture where people intentionally say things that are inflammatory to gain attention.
Mhm.
So that being said, the fact that we have this entire system, and sometimes it could feel very daunting, the fact that the entire culture would have to change for there to be better days, for us to reverse this process. And I don't even know if that's possible because we're so different now that, as you mentioned, the generation that's coming up now, they think differently, they value things differently because
Mhm.
what they have known is very much different from what we know. So it's a whole generation we may not necessarily be able to relate to, just simply because they are reared so differently. But even now, um, even if there may be just a remnant of light in all of this darkness, if you consider to be one of the remnants of light that exist in these dark moments, experiences that are taking place in the United States right now,
Mhm.
how do you continue to be light? How do you continue to be light in the midst of what seems so dark?
Yeah, it is absolutely possible. There will always be light on this planet. But what you have to really nurture and protect is what you feed yourself, just like nutrition. The more you actually sustain and actually create boundaries off of negative feeds, the more you'll be able to actually show your light in the world. But if you're actually flooded with so much negativity, fear, conspiracies, whether they're true or not, and otherness, that is what is going to come out of you. Whatever you feed yourself is going to come out. And so it's really about understanding, what are my morals and values, and how is it different from where the nation is going. Change your surroundings, find the persons that actually think like minded. We don't always have to be the same, but in regards to moral values, emotional safety, it is important that you reevaluate who you're connected to digitally.
Hmm.
And so it's really about practicing doing acts of kindness. The more and more you do acts of kindness without transactional, we don't want transactional relationships as well. That numbs Our
Even in the kindness.
Absolutely. Yes. So it's
Mm-hmm.
really about giving, and we're around a season that's all about giving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really just being mindful. What did I pick up today? What's my emotion and what is the emotion on the video
Mm-hmm.
that I'm carrying? And
Mm-hmm.
really sit with yourself and become comfortable. If I can't reiterate it enough, there's too much reliability on researching first and actually giving yourself, your mind, time to actually generate creativity and ideas and remembering.
Can you say that again?
Yes.
No,
There,
I really want to hear this again.
yeah. So there is a hyper dependence on researching. As soon as you actually think a thought, a question, you forget a word, a name. There is an immediate response to go to the phone, to go to AI, to go to the computer, rather than sit with yourself and allow your mind to do what it naturally does, to actually think, to remember. We're not computers. And if you continue to actually treat your mind and your brain that way, you will have less intelligence because you're not giving your brain the room to actually have those neural connections, to actually have the capacity that I still need to remember. I need my memory. So I'm also really following research around the effects on dementia and Alzheimer's and how it may increase over time because we're not growing the branches that we need to. We're not following, just really remembering directions. We're putting it in our GPS, right? Following. We're not really thinking, okay, I forgot this name. Sit for a moment, wait, let it generate. That's how you actually grow more dendrite, more connections, more neurons. If you're not doing that, your dendrite, your neurons dies off. Your brain literally thinks you don't need it anymore.
I'm so fascinated. I am so fascinated. That makes 1,000% sense. No pun intended. But you're so right. It's the muscles we're no longer exercising because we're so dependent on technology. Man, I think you have changed my upcoming year. I think I will be focusing more on activating my brain to do things that it feels like it may be struggling to remember. And now it may be struggling to remember because it hasn't had to remember. And I did read recently that scientists are showing that social media is actually having a physical impact, to your point, on the brain, that it's actually, they're seeing loss of certain white matter in the brain as a result of the type of activities that we do on social media. So there are physical changes that happen to the brain as a result of our exposure and our use of technology. So I like the fact that you're saying perhaps we're not seeing as many inventions as we used to
Hmm.
because people are not exercising their ability to be creative.
Yes,
People are utilizing now even technology to come up with creative ideas.
absolutely. And we have to ask ourselves, is that creative?
Right. Right. Exactly. Oh my gosh. And to your point, I like the fact that we're linking also for anyone who's maybe watching that there are physical consequences of some of our behavior, just like there are physical consequences of hatred. And a lot of people don't realize that. They feel that oftentimes when people are hating other people, they don't realize that they're actually cutting off their life expectancy. So
Mm,
hating someone has physical consequences. Being a racist has physical consequences of affecting your cardiovascular system, of affecting your metabolism, and ultimately altering your life expectancy. So hating someone does nothing for them, but you are cutting off your own life.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, yeah. And so that's important for people to know that there are these consequences of these types of thought process and behaviors. Dr. Black, listen, I feel like I need to write a thesis paper on this topic now.
We all do.
As serious as this topic is, it's mind-blowing, just as you said, how layered it is. There's so much to cover, there's so much to discuss. And I think, if nothing else, just making America aware of stop America, pay attention to what's going on. We are losing the soul of America, and that's serious. And we did have a president who said that his goal was to save the soul of America.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've gone down a path that is so dark,
Mm-hmm.
subsequent to that, that it makes you wonder if the soul of America can still be saved.
Yeah, absolutely. But we don't know if the collective soul of America can be saved, but individually, the soul can be saved.
Co-sign to that. Amen. Hallelujah. Yes, absolutely. And that is the hope that exists.
Yes.
And Dr. Black, if people want to have tete-a-tete with you and dive into discussions like this or other discussions, how can they reach you?
Sure. You can visit my website at www.drtamalapractice.com. All of my information is there, and if you need resources, I'll be happy to provide them to you.
Wonderful. I'm definitely going to be watching this. Well, I'll be watching this video again for sure, but I'll be definitely watching this video again from a student perspective, because I feel there's so much to learn and so much to process about what's going on. As I just hope that people are staying conscious, because it's so easy to live life in this subconscious layer of thinking and existence. And it seems to be the easy path. So I'm hoping people are willing to become more conscious human beings, and to really be able to be reflective and see what's going on, and not just be in the flow of what's going on. That being said, I am Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club right here on YouTube, and HealthyBump.club on Instagram. And don't forget, we're also on fan base, because we support our own. I know that's right. We thank you guys for watching, and let us know what you think. What do you think about the soul of America? Have we gone too far? Is it worth saving? Can we save it? We want to know what you think. And after you're done there, make sure you check out our other videos, especially with Dr. Black, because as you guys can see, she lays down the truth. She helps us to understand life. And there's a lot of other topics that she's helped us with. So make sure you check out those topics. We're going to link some to this video. And after that, we'll see you guys when? Next episode. And wait. Before you go, one more thing. Happy holidays to you and your family. But before you go, we just want to make sure that you got the message of today. Yes, the world is dark. And yes, it seems like things are darker than they've ever been. But most importantly, we want to remind you that you are a light. You have the choice to be light in this dark world. Not only can you be light, it's important to be light. And so we hope that you take that message with you, not just through the holidays, but also through the rest of the year and years to come. We thank you so much for your support, and we wishing you and yours the best, not just any best, but God's best. Happy holidays.